your turn.
Please don't tell my mama this ain't marijuana. Enjoy your mind trip, but don't trip on your mind. No man is safe from the war going on outside.
That's some crazy ass shit.
Is it crazy?
Yeah, that's some crazy ass shit.
Damn.
It is crazy. But I think it's like a different, you know?
Different type of crazy. Scary legal shit, I guess.
Yeah. I feel like that was like bad situation.
It was a bad situation, dude.
That was like a bad setting.
So true.
I feel like my major challenging trip was like a bad mindset. You know? Mm-hmm. Because I feel like my worst or my most challenging trip was like when I was younger. I started out with mushrooms, and then I started getting really into acid, and acid meaning LSD and or research chemicals. So I was in this moment where, you know, I had a damn near unlimited supply to fucking LSD, an absurd amount for myself. And so my parents were going through a breakup. My mom had just come in my mom had just came out as a lesbian, and so my parents were breaking up. And so I was home alone all the time while they were doing their thing, trying to, you know, figure out the whole divorce thing. So every fucking weekend I, you know, drop a fuckload of acid. Like, I got all this acid on hand. I'm just gonna, you know, take 5, 6.
Do it all.
7, 8, 9, 10 tabs.
Oh my god.
And so they'd leave and I'd drop acid, but it'd always be super late at night, and I'd always be doing it alone. Like, when I started tripping, I tripped with one friend, and I would trip with him every single time. But that happened for maybe 4 or 5 times, and then after that, I was just like, all right, I'm about to embark on this journey myself. So then I would just be tripping, you know, really exploring my own mind, my own psyche for a long time. There was one particular night, and I don't quite remember like exactly what had happened that week, but I was in a weird mood, and I remember being kind of like anxious or apprehensive towards doing this, because it's like before this had happened, I'd say it was my first like real like, well, I just remember it being one of the times where every few weekends I'd be like, all right, I'm gonna try and, you know, see where this goes. And so I took it, and like my usual routine for the night would be, you know, I would drop it, and then I would go out and walk around until it hit. And so on this particular night, my dad left late, so I walked around a little later, and it's like, you know, in this neighborhood, in the neighborhood I lived in, once like 11 o'clock hit, there was nothing happening. You were the only one out all night, which was also like kind of a blessing in disguise, you know, so all the weird shit I would be doing outside would never be noticed. I start walking around my neighborhood. Within like 20 minutes, I immediately start feeling really off. Like, this ain't the right trip, you know what I'm saying? Like, every other trip before this, it'd be like coming up, and I'd be like, oh, this is great. It's coming on nice, I'm feeling good, things are getting weird, I'm having a good time. This time, no, it was like immediate paranoia, immediate like introspectiveness to the point that I couldn't function properly. And so I'm walking around my neighborhood, and I have this like, it's not like a headache, but it was like an immediate, like someone was focusing a laser beam on my head. Like, you just have like this pressure on the top of your head, so it kept drawing my eyes up into the corner. So I'm walking around my neighborhood looking paranoid, like tweaked the fuck out as far as I could tell. Because I'm just like walking around, like I know someone, like there's this thing watching me, there's this thing following me. And it's the fucking dead of night, like it's midnight, it's 1 a.m. I don't know what time it was, I never really was keeping track of time. I just know it was late, no one was out. And I'm walking around, and I just keep getting this constant pressure in my head, like someone is fucking watching me right now. But not just like watching you, they're like watching you in your head. So it's not like you're on the side of the street and someone's looking at you from the other side of the street. It was like someone was in my head watching me, and someone was listening to my thoughts. Someone was in my head. Someone was in my head that wasn't me. And so that started to really freak me out. The only person that's ever been in my head was me. And now someone that wasn't me was in my head. So that was super weird. And so I was getting more and more anxious and trying to walk home and trying to figure out my way home. But in the neighborhood I was at, in that state of mind, was like a maze. So I was walking around, but every single corner of every block looked the same. I couldn't read words. Try to look at like the, what do you call them? The street signs, and like figure out what the numbers were or the street names were, but I couldn't make it out because it was just like the open-eyed visuals. The visuals visuals of like what I was seeing and take into account like it was very dark out, so I could not see shit. Everything that was in my visual perspective was warped to the point where I had no fucking idea where I was. It was like being blackout drunk but completely lucid and being able to remember everything. Everything just became a fucking mandala and I couldn't see shit. I was just wandering around in this mandala maze trying to figure out how the fuck I'm gonna get home. And for some crazy reason I made it home, and I have no idea how I made it home. And I walk into my door and things like snapped and I became completely lucid. Like the moment I walked through my back door, and my back door is a complete glass pane, so there was no wood, it was just like a completely glass door. So in the dark you could see your reflection in it. So I walk up my steps and I go in the door, and then the absolute moment I walked through that door, just like it snapped and I went completely dead sober. Like all the visuals went away, everything just became completely lucid. Knew exactly where I was.
Dude, you have PTSD from that night when it gets dark outside.
I know, when it gets dark out, it's super weird. But either way, it like went completely sober, and I was just like, and that really struck me because that's never happened in my past, where it's like been a moment where I've just gone from like tripping balls to dead sober in half a second. And I was just like, I'm just sitting in my kitchen and I'm like, what the fuck?
Because all this other probably adrenaline was fueling your bodily reactions, and like that was causing crazy visuals.
I feel like the only way that I got home was just by pure muscle memory.
Yeah.
It was super weird. I'd never been to the point where I was tripping so hard that I was lost in my own neighborhood that I've been in for just like years. Because for reference, I was 17 at the time. I'd lived on that exact block in that exact neighborhood for 17 years.
Damn.
I'd never been lost before. Like I had friends all over that neighborhood, so I knew every single house for like a 4-block radius. Like I'd been past every single house, so like it was jarring in that sense, where I just like I knew where I was, but I had no visual representation of where I was.
I like just realized that you grew up in like the whitest shit.
I know. Which is super
Oh my
weird.
God, so funny.
But then I get home and I'm like just super wigged out about what just happened, how I just went from like fucking blasted to zero in half a second. It was like reverse DMT. It was like going from
Yeah.
That's all I can say. It was like reverse blasting off. Weirded out, so I look around and then I kind of am like wandering around my kitchen like, the fuck? Because it's late at night, getting kind of spooked. And then I catch a glimpse of myself in the mirror, and then another thing just clicks in my head. And I just go off because I like start to see it as this other person. Like now I can finally get a visual representation of the thing that was in my head before. That I knew wasn't me. So now I was like seeing who was in my head in my reflection.
Oh, interesting.
So I was freaked the fuck out because like
that's who you were seeing?
Yeah, I like looked at my reflection and it wasn't me. Or
like it felt like the same energy as to what you were. Yeah.
It felt like the same energy as to what I had felt in my head earlier, and I was visually seeing it now. So I flipped the fuck out.
But you felt sober still, or no?
No, at that point, I started to feel like, I mean, I wasn't getting like visuals, so I was sober in that sense, but I definitely didn't feel like sober. Like I knew something was kind of off, but I was definitely didn't feel like I was tripping. But I see this thing in the fucking reflection, and I freaked the fuck out, and I started screaming at it. And I was like, top of my lungs, like screaming at it. Like, get the fuck out. What are you doing here? Get the fuck out of my head. Go away. I don't want you here. And then it fucking talks back at me. But then it was like weird because it talked back at me, but it used my voice. It used my body as the receptacle. So it looked like when you're doing all this, like you felt like it was doing that back at you? No, because it wasn't doing it back at me. So like I'm talking to this reflection and I'm like, yo, get the fuck out. And then when I got what I needed to say out, it like snapped again. And then it took over my body. The reflection took over my body as a receptacle. My voice changed. and I had no control over it. So it used my body and my voice to
yell back at you,
to give its message to me. And
vocally?
It was, yeah. Mm-hmm. And it was like, yo, fuck you. Like, I'm not leaving. Like, I like it here. Like, you get out. And it just became this back and forth. And then it switched into this third entity, and it switched into this third persona.
Are you being like, maybe you're the one? Remember in Us, how it was really the other one?
Yeah.
Is that how you feel?
I don't know. But like, all I know is that this back and forth happened, and then this other entity came out, because eventually the back and forth got like really intense, and I was like fucking screaming back and forth.
So you were vocalizing back and forth as you and as the other thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
just to give you guys a visual.
The weird part about it is that there was one part of me that I had control over, and my thoughts were
Don't tell my mama this ain't marijuana. Enjoy your mind trip, but don't trip on your mind. No man is safe from the war going on out.